you stream about all kinds of programming, but what kind of programmer are you? Are you full stack developer, web programming? And maybe can you lay out all the different kinds of programming and then place yourself in that in terms of your identity, sexual identity as well?
Yeah, I can get it. We can put it all in there.
Okay.
Plus, I mean, obviously those two are very, very tightly coupled.
I have seen you like on the border of sexually aroused by certain languages. I think you got real excited about Ocaml or...
Okay, well, let's go. Thank you, Dylan Mulroy.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
I did not expect that. That escalated quickly. Anyway, what do you identify as?
Okay, so first, let's do the previous or the in between question first, which is the different kind of archetypes. I think that's a really interesting kind of question because if you go on Twitter or you're new, your thoughts are probably that there is just web programming. And maybe there's some other stuff, like game programming, but you do like game programming in JavaScript and on the web. Like there's this very kind of very myopic view of the programming world. And I bet if you ask a lot of people these days, like what is the most popular form of programming, they'd probably say web. If you said what contains the most amount of repos, how many percentage of repos on GitHub are web-based? They'd probably say 90% or some huge number. But the reality is that there's an entire embedded robotics world. You're familiar with the ML side of things. There's networking. There's going to be just like performance operating systems, compilers. There's just huge amounts of variation of all these different type of programming verticals that you can be. And so we often talk about programming in perspective of web or something that's pretty narrow. And I think that's just a social construct of Twitter more than anything else, that it's actually, I don't believe it's that representative of the entire kind of programming world out there. And I think a lot of programming is really, really fun. There's some really great stuff. Building your own language is just a very fun experience to do. Every programmer should just do that once, just to have a completely different, perspective on how things work in life. But as far as what do I do, I've always looked at myself as a tools engineer. So at my time, at my jobs, typically, I would start off on the UI. And then they'd be like, okay, well, hey, we need a library for this thing. So then I'd be the one writing like the library. So in 2012, 2013, I was writing a UI library for the web that can behave just like an iPad. So you can pinch and zoom on it, but it's still a web page because we didn't have any of that stuff back then. It was a canvas, had to do all the like matrixy operations and all that stuff to kind of,
Nice.
It felt like you're on an iPad, but it actually wasn't on an iPad. And this was iPad 2, by the way. So this is a long time ago. And so every single time I got into a job, it's like, okay, hey, we need to do a library. Hey, can you work on a build system? So back then there was no Grunt, there was no Gulp, there was no any of those things. So I had to hand roll my own JavaScript build system. And so I always fell into these positions of building tools for developers to be successful. And I've always really enjoyed that region. So as I went on to, say, Netflix, spent 10 years there, I'd say the majority of my 10 years were building things for developers to use that they could be successful at their job. And so I've always really enjoyed that aspect because your stakeholders and the people that use your program understand programming, and they're going to say like, hey, I need this. And typically the thing that they need, they actually want. Whereas with people want stuff, but what they actually need versus what they actually want often are kind of like this weird separation. People, that's like the old Henry Ford quote, I just want a faster horse. And he's like, no, what you actually want is a car. And so it's like this, like you have to play this game of trying to really figure it out. Whereas developers, it's like, I know, what I'm doing. I know what you want. Let's figure it out together.
That gives you a really nice big picture view of programming in general. So I love the idea of just kind of starting at the interface, like you need to pinch and all that kind of stuff, and then figure out the entire thing that requires to make that happen, including maybe the side quest tooling, how to make it more productive and efficient, all that kind of stuff. So the entirety of the thing, that's really cool. Okay, so that would be full stack. By the general definition of full stack, meaning like
perhaps, yeah.
Versus like systems engineer, like starting at the bottom and trying to optimize a certain kind of specific thing without seeing the big picture of like what the resulting interface would look like. And a lot of people, in web programming, they never go beyond the front end of how the thing looks. They kind of always assume there'll be somebody, some grunt in the shadows, in the darkness of the basement that will implement the backend.
Some Guilfoyle out there will be doing the backend. Yeah, like I like to call myself a generalist, just to kind of give some ideas is, at one point at Netflix, I built the WebSocket connection. So for TVs, how WebSocket works is code I just wrote.
Hmm.
And so I, built the framing thing. And before that, I was doing stuff with memory. And before that, I built a UI for a tool. Right? It's just like I can just do the thing. You just tell me the thing to do, and I'll just go do the thing. I don't try to get super good at one specific activity. Like I don't want to be a Kubernetes engineer who's the world's greatest deployer.
Hmm.
But if I had to go learn Kubernetes, I'd go learn it and learn how to deploy some things and then hopefully move on to like the next thing, if that makes sense.